Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Heroes Trek with me, your host, Samir. It's nice to see everyone once again for another marvelous or DC-rific or something review. Before we get to that, make sure you click that like button, subscribe, or tweet us at Heroes Trek, right up there. And also leave a comment below because I love to interact with all the fellow fans who are, fans of these graphic novels and comic books that I like to talk about so much. So let's take a trip, shall we? Let's take a trip away from the stress of the world for the next, maybe 10 minutes or so and talk about the latest book that I've read. And actually I've read it about 3 times now, and we'll get into that why I read it 3 times in a moment. But that book is a book featuring a character that is so versatile that you can write pretty much anything about the character and fit the character in through any kind of situation. I've mentioned this before in some of my previous videos, talking about how the character can be like a James Bond figure, or the character can be a dark, menacing creature of the night, and so on. And so you can see some of those videos up there, and if it's a hint of a creature of the night and so on, it's not a vampire, it's Batman. Although Batman has been a vampire in one of those Elseworlds tales. So, Batman is one of those characters that, you can write so many different stories about, probably arguably the most versatile character in any kind of media, whether it be comics, graphic novels, cartoons, live-action movies, you name it. There have been so many incarnations and variations on the character. And it's interesting to see, or to get to the core of what makes this character so versatile. What is it about the character? And how also it ties into the mythology of the undying human spirit, right? The spirit to persevere, to succeed no matter what the cost, no matter what the loss. And it ties into a lot of those, pretty much human mythos or mythology, that we have, that really resonates with us. We always like to see our heroes really be fighting through anything, right? Persevering, fighting, never giving up, always going on till they do the right thing and win. And those are the stories we cheer the loudest for, right? We do like those anti-heroes, right? The Punisher and things of that nature. But I don't think we quite cheer as loudly as when the Punisher wins in a battle as we do for when Batman or Superman or Spider-Man wins in their battles, right? So this review is actually for a book that on the third read really grew on me, and I finally said, I had an aha moment. Aha! Yes, an aha moment that said, now I get it. I get what this book is about, and I really enjoyed it, and I really understood. So hopefully I can tell you what I understood, so maybe you can understand as well if you haven't read it. And if you have read it, share your thoughts, so see if you're on the same page as I am. But this book is called Batman Detective Comics. Of course, it's Mythology. It's a hardcover, standard sized hardcover, which means the smaller comic book sized hardcovers from DC Comics, written by a writer who I've loved his work from over a decade now or more, Peter J. Tomasi. By the way, Peter J. Tomasi wrote an excellent graphic novel on the Brooklyn Bridge and the history of the Brooklyn Bridge and the family that built it. Well worth checking out, a must for any fan of well-written historical kind of, it's non-fiction, but although he's put a little flourish on it, but it tells you the story of the Brooklyn Bridge and how it was, the struggles that went through to build it in New York. That's a side note. But Peter J. Tomasi is a writer who I've enjoyed his work. I don't think I've ever read a story from him that I haven't enjoyed, that I haven't really loved. He started off as an editor with DC Comics. Of course, he was editing JSA when Jeff Johns started on that book. He went on then to write Green Lantern Corps, a significant run on Green Lantern Corps, which was really good and actually rivaled in terms of quality the actual Green Lantern, the main Green Lantern book by Jeff Johns. And many times Green Lantern Corps was even more enjoyable month in and month out, and I'm still waiting for that omnibus for Peter J. Tomasi's run on Green Lantern Corps, but that's again a little hint for DC if you're watching, although I don't know if they will be. So this book is a hardcover. It's collecting the first, let's see, 994, 995, 996, 997, 998, 6 issues, collecting 6 issues of Detective Comics. These are the stories that actually lead up to that landmark 1000, issue number 1000. So you probably heard of the character Arkham Knight. This is before that. This is not focusing, thankfully, on that storyline. This is actually a more intimate storyline, and I want to get to that in a moment. But the artwork in this really pushes this book over the edge for me. It's by Doug Mahnke, and he is such a great artist. I mean, he is, again, another one of those underrated artists. I personally feel like he is just as good as Jim Lee, and in certain cases, I would say, I know it's blasphemy, but maybe even a little bit better. He actually puts a lot of detail in, and his artwork is so well put together, well constructed, and it's just, it takes every story. When he worked on the Justice League, it was like, to me, that was awesome. He also, when my first introduction to Doug Mahnke was probably Major Bummer, which was this old cult classic series from DC Comics, which was about this loser who's got superpowers, and a really good series if you can track it down and find it, that is, at this point. So, two top-notch, stellar creators, Peter J. Tomasi and Doug Mahnke. And you know, the funny thing about the Batman series is that the main Batman book, which of course at this time was written by Tom King, is more action-oriented, adventure, and so on. And then Detective Comics has always been one of those, you know, how do you distinguish Detective Comics from the main Batman book? You know, do you throw in Batman more as a Dark Knight detective and so on? And I'm happy to say Tomasi does put the detective aspect in here. And this book is a bit more cerebral. Not to say it's boring, there's a lot of action, but it makes you think more than, say, the standard straightforward Batman book, which is hero versus villain and so on. And, you know, the trumpets in the background, you know, triumphantly playing the Batman theme. Not from, maybe from the 60s or from the movies. So, again, standard size hardcover, and let's see what this is about. I'd like to read the back caption because it gives you an idea, maybe teases you as to, if you haven't read this, to say, you know what, I'm going to pick this up, because I think it's available in trade paperback as well now. I wish this was an oversized, but I don't think they would do that for this. I don't know what DC's plan is for oversized hardcovers and how they decide which ones deserve it versus which ones don't. Maybe it's based on sales, maybe it's based on prestige of the artist, and so on. But let's read the back of this together, shall we? An old enemy returns, and a strange new mystery begins. A mysterious enemy who knows everything about Batman's history is pulling no punches. Clues take the form of disturbing reminders of the Dark Knight's darkest days, as he is forced to fight a losing battle to protect those who have been most important to his transformation from a scared little boy to Gotham's champion. When interrogating his foes inside Arkham Asylum raises more questions than answers, Batman must depend on himself alone to discover the mastermind behind these challenges. A foe who has been part of Batman's life since the very beginning of his crime-fighting career. Who could that be? The acclaimed writer-artist team of Peter J. Tomasi, who did The Adventures of the Super Sons, again a great series, before they aged Jonathan Kent up, which I think was a mistake, and Doug Mahnke, who did the Justice League, pit Batman against a figure from his past who knows all the Dark Knight's secrets. This opening volume collects Detective Comics number 994 to 999. And so here's the front cover, beautiful artwork, right? Back cover, right? Of course, it says volume 1 on the back cover. Of course, most companies, or the comic book companies, are now moving away from really putting in huge or emphasizing the volume 1 and volume 2. You notice there's no volume 1 on the cover. There's no volume 1 on the spine of the jacket, of the dust jacket, and that's because they're de-emphasizing that. And as I mentioned in one of my other videos, they're saying they're probably doing that because people who tend to pick these up, say not the hardcore comic fans, but anybody who's just generally going to pick them up, is more hesitant to pick up a volume 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 or 6. It's the law of diminishing returns, than they would be to say, oh, this is a standalone. I'll just pick this up and see what's going on. So you see a slow de-emphasis of the volume numbers. It'll be interesting to see whether they get rid of this. I know Marvel did that with their Conan book, but it'll be interesting to see how much time it takes for them to drop it all together, and how that affects and impacts storytelling as well, especially if you have a multi-part storyline. So when you take the dust jacket off, of course on the flaps, on the French flaps, you've got personal tragedy made Batman. Now a tragedy will bring him down. And, that's kind of ominous, right? And foreboding. And then the rest is, of course, the usual bios of the creators on that side. So pretty straightforward standard dust jacket. The cover on the inside is awesome. It's in this gold hue with Batman really popping off in his dramatic swinging pose, right after he's fired that grappling hook or grappling gun, and then he's swinging across. But with the gold background, it really adds something to that, right? Look at that detail that Doug Mahnke's put in there. Just awesome, isn't it? When you open the book up, it's pretty standard, black insides and stuff. Not too much effort into the design aspect of it, other than, well, the cover at least is not one of those the dreaded black covers, the cardboard black plain covers, which I think we've gotten spoiled by these with the images on them. So, and then when you go into it, what is the story title? It's titled, of course, Mythology, and that's a very poignant and telling title. At first, when I read this through, I was like, wow, this story feels almost disconnected, and it certainly is disconnected, and thank God for that. It's disconnected from the continuity that's going on, or that was going on around that time. All that Tom King, City of Bane, all that thing leading up to the City of Bane storyline, Catwoman, all that stuff, it's just on the wayside. And it really takes Batman and Bruce Wayne to the core of the character. What is it that makes Batman Batman? And what is it that has influenced him through his life? And Peter J. Tomasi masterfully weaves the mythology, pun intended, of Batman into the storyline. It starts off with the first issue and you're just like wondering what's going on, and it's wonderful, the interaction between Batman and Police Commissioner James Gordon, right? And you always think that Jim Gordon really does know that he's Bruce Wayne, right? I mean, it's just kind of like unsaid, but the way it's written, it's like, well, it's kind of clear that Jim Gordon knows what's going on, and if he's a smart man, he knows that I think he knows Batman's Bruce Wayne. So it begins with a mystery, and what happens is that they discover two individuals who look just like Bruce's parents. They're made up to look just like Bruce's parents. They've been murdered and dumped into this water tank. And of course, spoiler alert here. If you don't want any spoilers, then I suggest you stop from this point forward, because it's hard to discuss this book without going through some spoilers. But it starts with the murder mystery and his two people on the death anniversary, his parents' death anniversary. On that day itself, two people are dressed up, made to look exactly like his parents, and are in this water tank. And it starts off with Batman and James Gordon just kind of looking at that and saying, what's going on here, trying to figure things out. The dialogue is perfect. And you see Batman really, or Bruce really use detective work. And Tomasi masterfully writes that detective aspect of it. You don't often see that Batman looking through everything, checking things. Like, for instance, in one line it says, the whites of this victim's eyes are normal. No evidence of broken blood capillaries from the strain of drowning. So they're like there's little attention to detail that a Dark Knight or a detective, a master detective, right? Batman's supposed to be one of the best detectives in the world. It's nice to see the dialogue actually showcasing that for a change, instead of just the action hero, which is what we normally get in the main Batman book. It goes on from there, and we have a reintroduction of some classic characters like Leslie Thompkins, who has a key central figure along with Alfred in raising Bruce as a child. Now, she's forgotten quite a bit many times, and sometimes pops in every now and then, given some importance, and then disappears into the background, right? Like Vicky Vale and all. Batman has a lot of supporting characters. But Leslie Thompkins, it was nice to see that character pulled back into the spotlight. Well, sort of in the spotlight, as we'll see as we move forward. But the mystery is that there's this weird creature, and at first I thought it was Clayface, but it's not Clayface. I thought it was Clayface. It's an amalgam of all the Batman villains. At one point, this villain looks like basically they're heads of all the villains, Batman's classic villains popping out. Joker, Two-Face, Mr. Freeze, Penguin, all of them. It's a sight to behold, and Doug Mahnke does a great job with the artwork to showcase that. Here's some wonderful artwork right here. Needless to say, Leslie Thompson, something happens to her, and it looks like she doesn't survive, which is the mystery, right? Because a lot of this book is very surreal. It's a walk through memory lane. So Batman or Bruce can't save her seemingly, and that's very painful for him. But then Alfred gets attacked as well, and it looks like Batman figures out, or Bruce Wayne figures out, or Bruce figures out. Can I call him Bruce? Yeah, I guess so. figures out that somebody's tracking down all the people that mean a lot or mean something to Bruce and his development into Batman. Whether it be Leslie Thompkins, Alfred Pennyworth. And it's great to see Alfred alive in this, and you guys know what I mean if you've been following the current books. Let's start taking bets on when he'll come back into the books, because you can't have Batman without Alfred. But there is an awesome scene in here where, in order to make sure that none of his old enemies are behind this, Batman goes to Arkham Asylum, and he basically goes in there and he's like, okay, he said, so cooperation and information are our watchwords this evening. Anything less will be problematic. I want you all to think of this place like a carnival fun house tonight, except the only monster in here with you is me. And that's classic. And Tomasi doesn't even need to show the battle or the fight. He just shows the aftermath and everybody's beaten up and nobody knows anything. So it's kind of frustrating. So Bruce continues on his quest. He goes to Ducard. Some of this ties into Peter J. Tomasi's excellent run on the Batman and Robin book, which there is an omnibus of. If you haven't read that, highly recommend it. It's really so well written. And that's the only thing we're missing from this, is kind of that dynamic between Batman, Bruce, and Robin, Damian, because Tomasi is so good at writing that dynamic of father and son. He's the only one that really got it. Scott Snyder has come out and said that he's uncomfortable writing Damian. He's not as comfortable writing Damian into the Batman book. Tomkins just doesn't, I don't think, really captures the voice of Damian as well. The only writer that I feel captures Damian's voice is Tomasi, but Damian is only in here like sparingly, and for a reason. So Batman goes to the people that were responsible for, he thinks maybe part of this or responsible. He goes to Ducard, of course, one of the men who trained him, right? And every time I see him, I hear Liam Neeson's voice, because it reminds me of the character from Batman Begins, but it's not him. And then the creature comes, of course, tracking him down. There's all those faces I was talking about. Beautiful artwork. It just makes me take a step back. Batman goes to the let's see where he goes. The Temple of Kirigai, to another person that he learned from, Kyodai Ken, and finds everybody murdered and so on, and one person left, and the sensei left as well, and he's wondering what's going on, who's tracking these people down. And then there's this mysterious old man, of course, wearing the Mr. Miracle costume, which threw me off for a second. I'm like, what's going on here? But that's also someone else as well. That's Thaddeus. Thaddeus is actually, Thaddeus Brown, I should say the whole name, is one of the men who helped train Bruce Wayne to be an escape artist, a master escape artist, but he's also one of the men who trained Mr. Miracle, and that's why he's the original Mr. Miracle. He wore the costume before he passed it along to, of course, the Mr. Miracle we know now, and now was with Big Barda. Plug for that Mr. Miracle book by Tom King. It's really excellent, but also very crazy as well. So the creature, of course, mutates throughout the storyline, looking like this now, and keeps following Batman seemingly through all these different trials and tribulations, right? Through all the mentors. Finally, Batman goes to Hugo Strange, but it's not Hugo Strange. And then there's a great side story with, of course, part of the story where he meets Etrigan. It's always great to see Etrigan and Jason Blood. I mean, any storyline with Etrigan in it, making those rhymes, the rhyming demon, it's just fun to see. Put on those nostalgia glasses for me, I guess. And of course, the return of Hellbat, which was instrumental in bringing Damian back to life in the previous Batman and Robin run from Tomasi. So all in all, when you go through all this, it's great to see all the pieces of Batman's mythology, all the many major pieces, people that helped train him and become Batman. And then it goes through this weird psychedelic point where it's just Batman sees little Batman, not Batmite, but little Batman, or the younger Bruce Wayne in the costume. And at that point, it takes a very dreamlike quality, and you start saying, is this reality or not? And they start fighting, of course. and battling. But as they're fighting, the dialogue goes back and forth. And even with the fight itself, Tomasi packs in references to previous storylines and classic storylines. For instance, in this, where they're both then aging up, and he's fighting with the same look that Bruce had in Batman Year One, and describing events in Batman Year One as well. Plug for Batman Year One, if you haven't read that, that's a must every year, one read a year. You know, and it winds up by the graves of his parents, and there's some great dialogue here. And of course, the young Bruce Wayne reaches out his hand and says, "Coming," and he says, "The 3 people were murdered that night outside the Monarch Theater, but one was reborn, baptized in his own blood. These graves aren't here to feed revenge. These graves are here to feed justice. They represent the living and breathing citizens you prevent from going to the dark before their time. Everything has a price." And of course, the older Bruce says, "And that price was you, Bruce." And he's talking to the younger version of himself. And the younger version of himself says, "I can honestly say that knowing how many men, women, and children we've saved over the years, well, that price was worth it and continues to be." And then Bruce goes, "All those dark years, I still wish you could have had a chance to be a kid just a little longer." And the young Bruce Wayne goes, "It's okay. So many other children have gotten to because we didn't." And you know, he says, "The shovel, it's time." And Bruce basically is burying his past, burying himself as a kid. And he says, "Be your best, Bruce. Never question your mission. Gotham needs you." And it's kind of at this point where you say, oh, everything fits into place, this mythology. Who could test Bruce the most to his utmost limit? Not only in a physical, but a psychological way, to kind of prove that to himself and understand himself that Gotham does need him. And though he has regrets, he knows it's for the best. Well, it turns out it's Bruce, spoiler, big spoiler, that the villain in this is not a villain really, it's Bruce. On his birthday, every year, he goes into a sensory deprivation tank, and he runs a simulation program that kind of tests his psychological mind to the limits. And of course, you see him here. And thankfully, every year, you would assume with this storyline that every year he comes out and he realizes psychologically that that Gotham needs him. And he basically says, honing each and every skill set I've learned to its maximum effect, assess every physical and psychological layer. My fear is that one night when I need to be stronger, faster, and smarter, I won't be good enough. There's a cost to wearing the cowl, just as there's a cost to being Robin, that we both know all too well. But that cost doesn't weigh as heavily as it would if I didn't wear the cowl. And that was what this whole part was, a revisit through the mythology, a psychological battle with himself to confirm and to strengthen his mind that he is actually the hero Gotham needs basically. And it's a very poignant, it's very amazing. And when you reread this, the first time you read this, you feel the story is disconnected. Maybe there's thankfully no references to that current continuum I was talking about. But every time you read the second or third time you read this, you start realizing that how Tomasi has laid these pieces of story like bricks to build a house, and he's done such a great job. Of course, there's an epilogue where he goes to the real Leslie Thompkins, and he goes to her clinic, and they go out for dinner with Alfred, and Tomasi quotes an excellent, he includes an excellent quote by Theodore Roosevelt here, which I want to share with you before we end the video, because it really encapsulates what the story's point is. He said, "There is not one among us in whom a devil does not dwell. At some time, on some point, that devil masters each of us. It is not having been in the dark house, but having left it that counts." Again, it is not having been in the dark house, but having left it that counts. So, many times, and that resonates for all of us, right? That's why Batman and Bruce Wayne, this story, mythology, resonates when you read it, is that there's a devil inside of all of us, and certainly we give in to those impulses at times. And it's not about never being in the dark house, but it's about coming out of it, but having left it, that counts. And that's basically encapsulates, Tomasi put an excellent quote, really encapsulates the story. I can't say enough about this. Give it a chance. It is well written. It's a classic. You could read it over and over again. And because it's in the 6 issues is all you need. You don't need anything else. You don't need the volume 2 of this unless you want to follow what's going on with the Arkham Knight. And that story, to be honest with you, compared to this story, was a little bit not as great. This one was really good. And I think part of it is the otherworldly kind of psychological detective aspects of the storyline. And of course the walk through memory lane of all of his mentors. One of which also is Victor Stone. I had no idea about that one, even though I read Batman for so long. Maybe I've forgotten it. Or maybe they retconned it in that Victor Stone helped Batman design his first grappling gun. So that's a little tidbit of information from the comic fanatic. Now, anyway, but well worth a buy. I would say go for it. This is highly entertaining and can be reread, not just a one and done, read it once and put it away in your pile, never to be seen again, or box it up away. This is something that you can pull out, and I know I will be rereading it more and more and getting more out of it as time goes on. Thank you, Peter J. Tomasi and Doug Mahnke, for an amazing, I think, evergreen classic in this tale. Well worth checking out. I highly recommend it, guys. And let me know what you think. I always want to hear what you guys think. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Heroes Trek with me, your host, Samir. And I'm happy to say, I'm happy to see you. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Click that like button, please. Oops, like button. Subscribe. Tweet us at Heroes Trek. Right? And check out our other videos as well. And soon those boxes will come up with the other links to the videos and the link to the channel. So that's like magic, isn't it? Nothing up my sleeves because I don't have any. Anyway, I'll see you real soon. Take care. Bye.